up, swashbucklers? You're listening to Under the Crossbones, episode number 97. My name is Phil Johnson. I'm your host for the show. Thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in if you're new to the show. That's also awesome of you. And thanks for telling friends and leaving reviews and all that kind of good stuff and helping me keep the old ship afloat. June has been a fantastic month for downloads. It's been our number one month so far, so that is all thanks to you. Number 97, episode 97. Fun fact about the number 97. I have stayed in 97 hotels over the last 2 weeks. And that is totally not true. I think it's been 9 hotels, but it feels like 97 hotels. It has been a long 2 weeks. I've been on the road doing gigs all over Oregon and Washington and driving just an insane amount of miles, like driving, 400 miles a day. My car is hanging in there. I'm in the old Corolla. See, here's the thing. It's not a glamorous life, the solo comedian on the road. I don't get a tour bus and a driver. I get to do all my own driving and then show up and tell jokes for an hour. So it's been exhausting, but good shows fairly well all the way around. Of course, before I get too far in, my guest today is Ozgur K Sahin, who is an author. He is the author of a book called The Wrath of Brotherhood, which is part of the Brethren of the Spanish Main series, and you are going to dig this interview. Ozgur is an interesting dude. We're going to talk pirates. We're going to talk astrophysics. We're going to talk meditation. We're going to talk book promotion. There's all sorts of stuff going on in this interview, and I think you're going to have a really good time with it. He is a fascinating guy. My brain is a little fried. I'm coming to you today from Bremerton, Washington, where I have one last show on tonight's tour. It's at a place called Mobster Mike's, but by the time you're hearing it, doesn't matter because the show's over. And then I'm going to take a few days off. I'm going to take a couple days off. If you want to see me before the end of the month, for some reason you have a deadline to catch me before the end of the month, June the 28th, I will be at Massey's in Walnut Creek, California. That is my last gig of the month, and it should be a strange one. Why? Because that's always a strange gig, and it's also the last one they're doing there. So Greg, the guy that produces that show, invited out all his favorite comics, and we're going to have one last blowout at Massey's in Walnut Creek. So that's a 9 p.m. show on the 27th, Wednesday the 27th. So come on out to Walnut Creek, join us, have a good time. It'll be great. The shows up here in the Northwest have been exciting and adventurous, as always, because some audiences are awesome, and some it takes a little more work to get them on board. Strange thing happened the other night. This was a week ago Sunday. I'm not even quite sure where I was exactly. I don't remember which city, but I was playing a pickup gig. It was a last minute gig. The headliner that was supposed to do it could not do it, and so I stepped in to do it instead. And I got a request for one of my songs, which is not uncommon. But this lady walked into this little bar gig where nobody even knew I was going to be there. I was just filling in, right? And so this lady walks in and she yells up to the stage, "Play your Rudolph song." Now that may sound strange, but I actually do have a Rudolph song. It's called Rudolph the Blood-Soaked Reindeer, and it is a Christmas song that you should not play at family gatherings. But anyway, she said, "Play the Rudolph song." And I said, I can't because I need a band for that song to work. It doesn't work solo. And she said, "Whatever, play it anyway." And I said, "No, really doesn't work without a band." And she said, "Whatever, play it anyway." And I said, "Okay, look, first reason, like I said, I need a band for that one. Second of all, it's not Christmas. Third of all, I don't remember how to play it. I'm not sure I've even ever performed that song live. I think I recorded it and put it on the internet, and I don't think I ever remember actually playing the song in a live performance situation." So she yelled one more time. She said, "Play it." And then I said, "No." And then she walked out and didn't come back. So it was a strange gig all the way around. But that was something that stuck out. Last night I was in Bend, Oregon, and Bend is always an interesting audience. And the strange thing about that gig, everybody had a good time. It was good, but what was really odd is all my surefire bits, like the ones that always work, did not work. All the other bits worked, but the ones that always work did not work at all. Which is always strange because there's this sublime little moment in a comedian's head where you're doing the setup and it's very quiet in the room because you're doing the setup, you're not doing the funny part yet, and you know that in the next 3 seconds the room is going to explode with laughter, right? And so there's this little calm before the storm. It's a comedian's like really like a favorite part of the show is when we know what's coming up next. And the audience doesn't know what's coming up next, and the room's going to just boom when we hit this punchline. But then when that punchline doesn't boom, wow, is that weird and awkward. Now, the audience didn't realize that. They just thought it was another joke, and it was just happened to be a joke they didn't like. But there's that weird disconnect in my brain when one of my foolproof, just fireproof, bang on, it works every time bits hits the floor for some reason. Now, if you've seen me before, it was like Pretty from the Back didn't work. Hawaiian GPS didn't work. A couple of my racier bits that always hit didn't work. Strange. It was so weird. Everything else worked. All my like not surefire hit stuff worked fine. But the A material, the stuff that kills every time, the stuff I would go to if I were having trouble in a show to bring me back, nothing. Very, very strange. Yeah, but there you go. That's Bend, Oregon for you. If you are enjoying the show, come join us over on Facebook, facebook.com/underthecrossbones. We're having a lot of fun over there. On Twitter, we're at undercrossbones. No the in that one. And if you want to help support the show, that would be awesome of you. Go to underthecrossbones.com/support. There's a little PayPal box where you can drop a donation into the box, whatever you feel is appropriate. Maybe the cost of a bottle of rum. Since I don't drink rum, you can give me the cost of a bottle. Whatever you think is appropriate, drop in that PayPal box. There's also an Amazon banner on that page, and click that banner, clickety-clack that banner. Go over to Amazon, buy yourself something nice, and Amazon kicks me back a few shekels. So that is always nice. It's not a lot, but it does help with the show. And if you want to be a sponsor on the show, if you've got a service or a product or something that you think a pirate crowd would dig, that is cheap and easy to do. Just go over to underthecrossbones.com/support, contact me from there, and we will get you all set up. The rest of the trip up here has been cool and adventurous. Some of the best driving in the country is the Pacific Northwest, particularly coastal Oregon, things like that. Just beautiful scenery, beautiful, beautiful scenery. I drove through Mount Hood National Forest today, which was great. It's fantastic, but I've driven through there 3 times this week. So I'd seen it, but it's always nice. At least it wasn't snowing. Weather's been great, really nice. I had a chance to stop in Portland the other night and talk with Kate and Shuey from Seven Sails Winery and the proprietors of the Portland Pirate Festival. And we had a great talk at their very beautiful house and winery. And that episode will be coming up in a couple of weeks, and you'll be able to hear that. And it's all good. But now, right now, I think we should get to our interview with Ozgur K Sahin. So, like I said, he's the author of The Wrath of Brotherhood, and you'll hear me mess up that title right at the beginning of the interview. But this is a pretty fascinating dude, and I hope you check it and like it and dig it and all those other kind of 50 slang words. So here we go. I'm so tired. Here it is, my interview with Ozgur K Sahin. Check it out. So you are a man of prolific interests and a writer and all sorts of other things, and you have a book out called The Wrath of Brotherhood, which is the first in the Brethren of the Spanish Main series. And so tell us a little bit about the book.
So it's set in 1660 in the Caribbean, and the basic pitch I give people is it's an English privateer captain sails to the Caribbean seeking misguided revenge for his sister's death. And the key word there is misguided. He blames his Spanish brother-in-law for not protecting her. Obviously, that's not really who's at fault here, but it sets the stage for the whole story. And so the title is sort of a dual meaning. It's The Wrath of Brotherhood, not The Brotherhood,
right? Because
there's the Brotherhood of the Coast, which is the collection of pirates and privateers active in the Caribbean at that time, but also it's the wrath of his sister's brother, of him. He's his sister's brother, and so the Wrath of Brotherhood is sort of a dual meaning there. But the misguided nature of his revenge quest is what colors the whole plot of the series, as well as the other main characters, some of which have their own concurrent revenge goals, and they sort of have to take a second look at those due to his own handling of his revenge.
Nice. And I like the characters so far. I'm about 2 chapters into the book because I just got it a few days ago, and I've been reading furiously. But I'm really enjoying it so far. It's quite good. And why did you decide to go with privateers rather than pirates? And I think that's going to also lead us back into some of the other stuff you've written as well. But why did you make that decision?
Well, partly, so I have a little bit of a history with growing up in my mom's house playing Sid Meier's Pirates on my mom's computer.
Yay,
and,
me too.
Anyone who's played that, remembers the whole letter of marque thing
that
you get from one nation or another. And I thought, it's for actual pirates. First of all, it's harder to create sympathetic characters.
Sure.
With actual pirates. I mean, you can do it. It's not that hard, but I just felt more like I wanted them to have friendly territory. I wanted them to have a home. I wanted them to have their own practices. I think with privateers, more than you see with the Navy, and even sometimes more than you see with actual pirates, the captain gets to sort of decide what the rules are on the ship. With the Navy, it's very it's very laid out, and with pirates, they even develop their own sort of democratic system. With privateers, I get to sort of make it be a little bit more unique to the captain and the crew.
That makes sense, and I would imagine just for the plot, you need the captain character, to be able to force some decisions. Otherwise, if the crew saw him as misguided, they would just mutiny and get rid of him anyway. Right, and
you'll notice as you read through the book that not a lot of attention gets called to his basically how righteous or not his revenge quest is. Mm-hmm. This book this is sort of the beginning. It's a trilogy, so this book sort of sets up that dynamic for him. Mm-hmm. And they periodically come back to it, and certain characters sort of look at it like, oh, that's a little embarrassing. But until he will end up maybe finding the guy or not finding the guy, it's all sort of academic to them, and they get to wander around being privateers in the classical sense.
Right. Nice. Now, since this is a trilogy, how far do you have the story mapped out in your head? Was this something that you came into where you knew what was going to happen in book 3 while you were writing in book 1?
It's funny, but I sort of came up with book 1. That was all sort of easy, cut and dried, prepackaged. Book 1 covers material that I thought to myself, hey, this would actually make for a good novelization. And it felt like it wasn't going, like the main arc wasn't going to resolve itself until after 3 books.
Okay.
But I didn't quite know all of the structure of the 2 books after that. I knew some of it. And so what I did was I outlined a little bit of that, and I just wrote and finished the first book. The harder thing to do was write the second one, which is now at my beta readers. The draft is done. Uh-huh. Because I had to take that story and extrapolate it out and sort of build structural points in the outline to, here's where it's going, here's where I want it to go, here's how I want it to all end up. So I've done a basic outline of book 3 now, mm-hmm. and the entirety of book 2 in terms of, whatever is going to end up at the editor.
Right. Why, as a writer, why pirates? Because, and let's unpack that a little bit. You have a pretty vast background in astrophysics and psychology and all sorts of stuff, which we should probably talk about too. So you've been writing for a long time. What made you want to write a pirate book?
Well, again, I've had a lot of early pirate influences. I love pirate movies like Captain Blood and Roman Polanski's Pirates. And
sure.
Little known fact here, the character of Ajuban in this book is actually inspired by a character from a movie called The Swashbuckler.
Nice.
In which James Earl Jones plays the first mate.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with that one.
Always, yeah, it's worth checking out. It's I forget it's Robert Shaw is the captain in that.
Okay.
Who also played the captain in an old series from the 50s called The Buccaneer.
Uh-huh.
And it's apparently they had him reprise that sort of role for the movie. But no, I grew up on movies like that, Sid Meier's Pirates. I loved pirate history. But I mean, there's more to it than that, I guess. As you said, I have a diverse background. I've liked astrophysics. After I left left college, I ditched out on that major.
Why is that?
Well, I got into it to sort of tackle the big questions. I like discovery. I like exploring. And I like finding answers to things. And I'm really good at concepts.
Okay.
And what I discovered was that most of my teachers, particularly calculus teachers, which you really need good calculus teachers, they weren't really teaching concepts. I was being taught that memorize this for the test. Mm-hmm. We'll throw as much work at you as possible. We'll try to weed you out kind of thing.
Right.
And it wasn't working for me. I wasn't picking up on the calculus. And eventually it just felt like, the creativity was burned out of this field of study for me. And, like you're paying people to try to weed you out. And eventually, between that and not really having much of a social life in college, it sort of worked.
You were weeded.
Yep. I was totally weeded out by that process. I don't respect that process, but that's what was going on. And it goes on at a lot of colleges that have research schools, graduate schools and whatnot.
Yeah.
So now anytime I life coach people, which is something I do on the side, I advise them maybe if they're doing school, I say maybe look into a place that doesn't have a graduate program, but has a really solid undergrad program, because the teachers are there to teach.
Yeah.
But I liked exploration. Once I left college, I started studying a lot on my own right around 2001, consciousness development.
Okay.
Ken Wilber's writings in particular, and meditative practices. I got really far with that, not just with the study, but what drove it was, my own personal meditative experiences.
Sure. How would you define consciousness development?
It's like a hybrid of studies, starting with the physical sciences and seeing, how development works physically and biologically, and then moving in towards developmental psychology and the things that we see in that cross-culturally, and then moving on into meditative practices, which are at the core of every religious tradition. And I grew up as an atheist, so this is an interesting field of study for me. Mm-hmm. But I found, like Ken Wilber's work sort of was a catalyst for putting all of that together. I mean, he really does a lot of that himself. But just studying development in all its forms, I found really answered a lot of those big questions that I initially gone to astrophysics for. Okay. And to bring this all back to your original question, there's an element of the age of discovery. I mean, it's all discovery to me, whether it's space discovery and astrophysics, self-discovery, like with developmental psych and all that, or age of discovery. There's always some element of it where there's a whole new world to explore, and you get to sort of walk through that. Now, with history, you sort of do that as an author and a researcher, just discovering all these things you never knew, this level of detail that's been there to discover the whole time. But I also get to write the perspectives of characters, discovering these entire new elements of life, like Koya from my book, discovering what it's like to be a privateer, and all of these privateers discovering new territories and new worlds within the one they already live in. I mean, it's a frontier. It's just like the Old West or any other kind of frontier. It's a largely untamed, unexplored wilderness where you have a high degree of freedom. And I think it's that high degree of freedom that also appeals to me for pirate stories.
That makes sense. And the character of Koya I thought was really interesting as well. I'm right into the book where she's just coming onto the ship and sort of coming to terms with the idea that her life is about to change considerably. And why did you decide to put a woman on the ship? Because that's a very disruptive, not to say it's a bad thing, but it's a very disruptive process in that time period on that kind of ship. So were you trying to just kind of churn up things and see what happens?
Well, actually, it's sadly simpler than that, which is that one of the ways that I've been into like pirate stories and all that before is I'm an avid role player, like tabletop role playing games like D&D and all that. And I used to run a pirate based one, and sometimes you've got female characters, and they want to play a female sometimes. And so I'd had this character before I ever conceived of any of that. I had this character that was an Inca, or like leftover remnant of the Incan Empire, like kind of descended from that line. And at some point, I sort of pulled that in to an RPG, but I did it for a player who was a woman. And I thought, well, there's nothing in this character that says it can't be. And so that sort of birthed that character. And a lot of what I pulled my story from was in that game. I thought, why not? If I can borrow the character of, or the basics of the character of James Earl Jones from The Swashbuckler, I can pull from my own gaming experience as well. So that's kind of how that came about. And then I just tried to extrapolate it to where it would make some degree of sense, like how people would react to a woman on board, why she would even be allowed on board, etc.
Interesting, yeah, and I think it's going to be a character that has a lot of depth to it as you go through the additional 2 books that are coming up. So that's really great. So do you see the writing as something that kind of is combining all of your other interests, or is it just sort of a piece of everything else that's going on? And the reason I'm thinking about this is because the idea of we have very similar backgrounds. I was a physics major, not astrophysics, but I bailed out during calculus as well. I went towards playing guitar, so I went a different direction. But the idea of the dilettante is much less looked down upon today than it used to be. 20 years ago, if you were into a bunch of different things and scattered about a bunch of different things, everybody kind of went, that he's not going to be worth much. But now it's become, I think with the help of Tim Ferriss and guys like that, it's become much more important, or at least people think it's more important to go investigate all these other different things because they've discovered that's where ideas come from. And so when you're looking at a book like this, is this a culmination of all of your stuff, or is it just simply a piece of everything else that's going on for you?
It's mostly a piece of everything else. It's one of my interests that I like to pursue, but there is a lot of bleed through.
Okay.
For example, there's a character who will come up at some point in this book, so I won't reveal too much of it for you, but who is a Spanish major, and he has a little bit of background, like his own family history includes some of the Far East techniques, like meditative stuff.
Oh, okay.
And I hint at it a little bit. I don't really drag it screaming into the narrative. I do actually employ some of the principles of like consciousness development and developmental psychology in here. I mean, for the basis for the story, the beginning, the jumping off point basically is a character who is misplacing his grief. Okay. And that plays into the whole trilogy. And obviously that has a lot to do with sort of the self-discovery stuff that I study. But I would say like my nonfiction work, because I do have a fair amount of that I'm working on. My nonfiction work is more, I guess, holistic in terms of encapsulating my interests.
Okay.
But I do like to keep some of these things separate. Eventually I'll probably even write some sci-fi. Not that I really remember much of my science, especially the math side of it. But I guess no one of these things encompasses all of my background, all of my interests. But they each kind of emphasize one thing, and then the other aspects sort of show up in there in minor ways.
Nice, interesting. And to return to the meditation thing for a second, you said growing up as an atheist that the meditation thing became an interesting subject because it is so based in many of the religions. Were you able to decouple it from the religions, or does it stay tied to that for you?
One reason that Ken Wilber is hands down my favorite author is that he largely decouples it in his writing, and I find that extremely useful as someone who grew up in an environment without all of the symbology, whether in Christianity or Buddhism or any of that, and just strip it down to core practices that work or don't work. I know he's got a YouTube video out there that talks about, how can this dovetail with science, and does it follow the basic tenets of knowing things? And I actually didn't start out studying it. I started out having these odd like higher consciousness meditative experiences when I was about 24, 25, and there were no drugs or anything involved. And this was very confusing to me. And I just sort of landed upon this stuff, and it was the first thing that actually explained, like encapsulated all of my experiences Well, because everybody has their own things. They want to interpret it for you, and here's what was really going on, and none of it fit. And so it was really valuable for me to land on that work. And I carried it further and employed it for my own self-growth and found, hey, this actually really works and is very, very accurate, and I don't have to sift through all the cultural terms all the time.
Right, and they're finding that there's more science behind it than was expected, I think. And so, every day in my Flipboard account, there's always another article about the benefits of meditation and the science of meditation and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's culturally being decoupled from the religion too.
Right, and the problem where you run into with meditative stuff is that one of the first things you run into with any sort of spiritual bent is that everything, it all starts with the assumption that this is unknowable, mm-hmm. and that everyone's beliefs equally matter then. And the idea behind meditative practices and the people who actually do them for long periods of time is that it's rather like saying that that you can't actually know whether the Pythagorean theorem works or not. Uh-huh. And so everyone's beliefs about it are equally valid. And if there is a way to know, then obviously all of that is nonsense. And that's sort of the realm where I like to explore and where I've done some work.
I really wish I could have used that argument in geometry class in high school.
Yeah, a little late. Wish I could have pulled that out in college.
Right? No, I believe it works this way, and it's totally wrong, but I don't care.
Yep.
It seems to be a lot of that going around these days. So,
right.
So then, what other kinds of? You said you're doing some nonfiction writing. What are you working on there?
Well, I used to have a weekly column at a website that is now defunct. It was called Calamities Press, and my column was called Elitism for All. Uh-huh. And I want to actually reclaim all those files and restart it on my own site. It's just I've been rather busy with this book.
Sure.
But that column was largely a social commentary, focusing a lot on narcissism, elitism for all. I love titles that have dual meanings. Uh-huh. So elitism for all was, at the same time about how everybody, let's see if I'm explaining this right. It's sort of about like how actual development practices make you actually better. So it's like an elitism, a kind of elitism, but it's one that everyone's invited to quote Ken Wilber there.
Okay.
But also that we have all of these massive areas infected by narcissism in our society, and how that leads to a different kind of elitism that we have to struggle with every day. People thinking, oh, I'm just better than everybody else because I found the one right way to talk about everything, et cetera.
Right.
And so it deals with narcissism a lot. And I want to actually put that in sort of a coffee table book. I also have a project more specifically on narcissism that I'm working on. I'm going to title it The Narcissist English Dictionary, which that's 90% of the people who hear that title react that way. And that's a good sign for me. But I'm doing a book of Uber stories because I'm actually also an Uber driver for income. I've got a few things on my mind, and I still want to get back to the book I was writing on intuition and common sense, how to contact them, how to distinguish them from each other, how they work, how to grow them and build them, that sort of thing. So, a lot of stuff like that I want to put out. I'm sort of trying to figure out how to not lose fans as I cross over from fiction to nonfiction, how to build my fan base, because once you switch up genres, you can kill the momentum of your career.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and one that I've dealt with too, as I switched from music to comedy and comedy music, and sometimes funny, sometimes serious, sometimes, and different styles and musical styles and all that kind of stuff. So I've dealt with that for a long time, and it's what I've found is that it's about bringing people into your world as a personality, so that they're more interested in you than in whatever it is you're writing. And by being interested in you, they'll be interested in what you're writing. That's at least how I've approached it over the last many, many years.
Yeah, that's actually one of the most common questions I get is, how do you go from astrophysics to developmental studies to pirate fiction? Mm-hmm. And I had to come up with a way to brand myself. And I said, well, all of these things have some form of discovery involved. And so just branding it as one way, like that these all have that in common, that does half the job for me. That sort of gives me an on paper logical following. But yeah, my approach in the last couple of years has really been to sort of not just brand myself, but sell myself, not just my work.
Sure.
And when people see that, like all of what goes into all of these interests, all of these writings, it really sort of solidifies some of that fan base. And, once you've got a core group of followers that will follow any work you do, then you can really build from there. It's kind of like, I know Sting at one point said, because people were talking about how his music changed so much, he said, well, I hope that there's this core group of fans that like my work enough that they'll follow all of these changes.
Certainly, yeah. And there's always going to be people that drop off. I mean, I have people that only like my serious music, or people that only like my stand-up, or whatever it is. But you do develop that sort of group that will go with you wherever the journey takes you, which I think is fun because it opens up the artistic process so much. So you've got all this stuff coming up. What is the next thing coming out that we'll hear from you?
Well, like I said, book 2 of the Brethren of the Spanish Main series is at my beta readers. Now, what that means for people who don't know what beta readers are, basically is I did the draft, and then I did a full round of editing based on what I think needs to be edited, what clearly needs to be edited. It wasn't like this is as good as I can get it or whatever, but as in terms of content and everything and catching syntax errors that leap out at me, I did all that. And then at that point, I think I know this still needs some editing, but I'm losing objectivity.
Right.
I will pass it out to my beta readers. Now, those are friends and family. I've got about 9 or 10 of these guys, friends and family who are good at giving valuable feedback. And the problem is that they don't have deadlines or anything. They do it as a volunteer work. And so far, it's really only my mom, who's great at the copy editing side of things, that has finished the thing. And I'm trying to get this out this year. So, of course, I want them all to finish up reading it and get back to me, tell me what I need to change, either from a broad perspective or just syntax. And then they'll get it back to me. I'll do another round of edits based on that. And then if I can find an editor that I want working on this, because I haven't yet, I found one person and she's unavailable. Then I'll send it to an editor. But the first book, actually, this was how I did the editing, was myself, a couple of non-book editors, but who still professional editors who looked at it as beta readers. And then, like 4 or 5 other people as beta readers, and just going over it again and again. The editing turned out pretty well, well enough for me to get an award from the Historical Novel Society. Helen Hollick was running that at the time. So.
Oh, yeah. She's great.
Yeah.
Nice. And so what was your process as a self-published author? What was your process for putting the book out and getting the word out about it?
Well, initially I wanted to be a traditionally published author, and all the research I did said no agent, no publisher wants to see a book from you as a new author that's longer than 120,000 words at the outside. And mine was, after I edited it down and like an additional 10,000 words, it was still 167,000 words. So I went through, I sent it out to 3 different agents, got the form letter, no thank you, from one, never heard from the other 2. I thought this could take me 3 years between finding an agent and getting a publisher to actually put the book out.
Right.
I may as well just write the next one and, keep going.
Sure.
So for self-publishing, I did a lot of research. I found lists of people who did book covers, who did book formatting. I put it out as an ebook first and foremost. That was, I didn't know how well that would do. You hear a lot of hype about how ebooks are booming and they're replacing books and all that. And I thought, well, I'll give that a try. So my formatter, who lives in Australia, charged me not much money to do the 2 ebook formats for both Kindle and everybody else,
right?
Because that's pretty much how the breakdown works.
Yeah.
My graphic designer, I went to online royalty-free stock art sites to find the images I wanted, and got my graphic designer to put those together into a book cover. She also helped me do the maps. I was really lucky to find one public domain map, and then the others were, again, royalty-free stock art.
Okay.
And got all that put together and did all the uploading to Amazon, Kindle, all that. And it just went from there. But about a year and a half later, by then I'd noticed I'd done enough events to see how impulse sales went and how people really wanted a physical book, and people kept asking me. And these clearly sell way better than ebooks. So I went to the same formatter, the same graphic designer, got the designer to do a full dust cover, the foil stamping designs, all that kind of stuff. Got the formatter to do a print version. Shopped around for quotes from printing companies. Turns out CreateSpace and Lightning Source, who do like they get into the bookstores, they have good distribution channels.
Right.
They won't do the end paper maps.
Really?
Like on the inside covers. They won't do it.
That's odd.
Yeah, it was really odd to me. And I thought, well, this is not negotiable. This is a key selling point of books like this. And it's one of the things that makes it clearly a professional work.
Yeah.
And so I found a company that did it, and they sent me their specs, like what size everything needed to fit, like for graphics and everything. My designers put their work in those dimensions, formats, whatnot, and sent it to the printers and paid up front for 2,000 copies, which reduced the unit cost, but was a big chunk of change.
Sure.
And they sent me all the books. I tried crowdfunding the thing, and that failed, A, because I didn't know enough of what I was doing, and B, I had a couple guys running the Kickstarter campaign, and right after the launch, the guy who was supposed to do all the internet marketing and everything just sort of disappeared. I think he realized he overcommitted himself. And,
yikes.
Yeah, so I mean, we're all good now, but I'm not going to do that again. I intend to crowdfund the second one now that I have a lot of names and emails of people who are interested in my work.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely learned my lesson with that campaign.
Yeah, those Kickstarters are a ton of work, and I've heard most people that I've talked to that have had really successful ones were putting in a year and a half, 2 years of work before even launching the campaign. So yeah, it's a crazy amount of stuff that goes into those. Yeah,
I would say the work that I've done for the second one is every time I do an event and sell a book or something, even if it's an ebook, I try to get the person to sign up my email notification list.
Sure.
Give me their name, their email. And now, not even counting friends and family, I've got just over 400 names and emails. And I figure most of them have bought my book. They're going to want deals on the second one. So that's my crowdfunding base, if you will.
Certainly. Now, you said you were doing a lot of events and things even before you had the physical book there. Were you selling them ebooks at the events?
I was trying to. The problem with ebooks is that you've got to give people an incentive to buy them on the spot. And I just didn't have one. I mean, I'd give them my card. They'd say, I'll download it when I get home or whatever. Right. But later on, when they get home, they've got a bunch of cards. It's overwhelming. Yep. Maybe they let those cards sit for a few weeks and then end up tossing them out and think, I really don't need all these new books.
Right.
And basically what I was doing at those events was I couldn't have a table either. There was nothing for me to sell at a table. So instead what I did was I put together this T-shirt that said Walking Book Promo. And it had details about my book and how much it was and, go here and buy it. And that really wasn't that successful. I mean, if you're walking around, people don't usually want to stop you.
Right.
But that's part of how I learned that I needed a physical copy. And so I've since been going to mostly sci-fi and fantasy conventions and Comic Cons. They all like pirates. And so I've been selling to them too. I finally figured out even a way to impulse sell to ebook buyers is I do this little coin promo. Like I go to Colombia a lot. And so I come back with just these handfuls of Colombian coins. And I've started using them as book promos. So if you buy a book, even if you just stand here and download the ebook, you get a free Colombian coin. But you've got to do it while we're at the event.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, because I've noticed there's a lot of comedians and musicians that use download cards at their merch table. And every time I go, how's that going for you? They go, it's not. And I say, yep, that's why I don't do them. Because nobody, they want that physical thing as a souvenir of where they were is essentially what it is. And I can't remember the last time I sold a CD online, but I sell dozens of them at my shows. And but online, nobody wants to buy physical stuff. They only want the digital stuff. So I think part of it is just where they are right then and what they're trying to get out of that transaction.
Right. I actually the words that came to me as I was watching people sell their physical products was that, I mean, it's sort of a visceral thing, wanting this physical thing.
Yeah.
And even with physical media disappearing, people still want some physical thing. And so it seemed like what they really wanted was not just the story, which is all the ebook is. They want something, they want a product that is at once a story, souvenir, and handshake.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And so what I've done is when they buy the physical thing at my table, I send them the digital files to go with it, because I know that's what they're actually going to use. And of course, I want them to actually consume the art, just like you want them to actually consume the book. Yeah.
And that's on the subject of the art too. I've noticed that all media seems to basically be, for a buyer / investor, 100% risk until it's consumed. And art is immediately consumed because you know exactly what it is as soon as you look at it. Music is a slower consume, but it's still quick. And books take the longest to consume. And so the only way to really sell them that quickly is to lower that sense of risk, maybe attach art, which is, comes across as zero risk, reviews, awards, it's all zero risk stuff.
Sure.
Attach as much of that as you can to this high risk thing, and people eventually decide to buy it.
Yeah, there's definitely that social proof aspect of it. I hadn't really thought about books being the highest risk of them all, though, because of the length of time it takes to consume them. That's pretty interesting. So is there what other kind of techniques have you used outside of, to lower that risk besides the social proof stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the award helps me immensely. Reviews, printing some reviews, not just reviews on the back cover, but reviews by people who run publications for some periodical, like, they run a pirate website or the awards program or something like that. But otherwise, that's partially goes back to selling yourself and not just your work.
Sure.
If people like you, they will buy your work. And so when I'm at these events, I don't just wrap it up as soon as dealer hours are over and go home. Often there are room parties and things like that after. I'll go to those, get to know people. I'll, answer questions, but also just, I'll go do karaoke. It turns out that singing Silent Lucidity at karaoke usually results in 1 or 2 book sales the next day.
And a Queensryche fan. Man, you and I are going to get along great. This is good. That's funny.
Well, I know that's the one thing I can definitely do at karaoke. And so I've had book sales come right out of that. And but mostly, like the social aspect, basically marketing yourself as a whole experience, marketing your book as just an extension of that. But yeah, other than attaching the art and having a good display, that's another thing I've done. Most authors, I'm really sad to see this, but most authors, they might put a lot of work into their cover, they might not, but whether they do or not, they don't really seem to realize that the display, their table display at an event, is sort of their book cover for the event.
Certainly, yeah.
It's an artistic display, and a lot of them just throw their books on a table and start selling them or attempting to. And what I did, I have a lot of piratey stuff at home. I have like this map of the Caribbean I bought on a cruise ship, and I've got this flask I got at Renaissance Festival, and this souvenir cannon thing that I got in Italy, and I put it all together into this awesome piratey display. There are even pictures of it on my website, and it pulls people in. And I got to tell you, if you're at a Comic-Con and you're at a creator table and you're next to some artist, you're like sandwiched in between 2 artists,
sure, and
you just have a pile of books on the table, people are going to walk right past you.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to give them something else to look at and have some sort of cohesiveness to the brand and the image, and anybody who's seen my show and my dumb red shirts knows exactly what I'm talking about. So great, man. Well, you are a savvy and creative person, so it's been really fun talking to you. Where's a good place for people to keep up online with what you're doing?
Well, I would go to my website, which is OzgurKSahin.com. That's OzgurKSahin.com. I try to keep that updated, at least in terms of anything that's relevant. If you want to be on my email list, just contact me through the website and ask. I will add you to my direct emailing list. Otherwise, I've got a Facebook fan page, Ozgur K Sahin. I've got a Twitter account. I mean, honestly, I hate Twitter, but I update it occasionally. The best ways really are the website and the Facebook page.
Fantastic. I'll make sure to link those up in the show notes. And yeah, don't forget the K, because without the K, it goes to some domain squatter.
Yes, that's actually the whole reason I put K, my middle initial in my author name.
Yep.
It wasn't because K is a very lucky middle initial for an author, J.K. Rowling, Philip K. Dick, Laurel K. Hamilton. I like that as well. But no, if you just Google my first and last name, there are a million of us, mostly in Turkey.
Interesting.
But, it's necessary.
Yep, there it is. There it is. Well, great, man. This has been super fun. I appreciate you coming on and talking.
Oh, no problem. I'd be glad to come back anytime you got a spot open.
You got it, man. We'll talk again soon.
All right, thanks.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And there it is, friends. That is my interview with Ozgur K Sahin. And you can find him at ozgurksahin.com. Let's spell that again. Ozgur K, letter K, like J.K. Rowling. Sahin, Sahin. A lot of things in there don't spell like they sound, because he's Turkish, and that's cool. So go check him out at Ozgur K Sahin. Of course, that'll all be linked up on the show notes, as well as links to his book that you can click through Amazon and get. And like I said, Amazon kicks me back a few pennies. And you also help support the show, which is awesome for you. All those show notes will be at underthecrossbones.com/097. Man, we're coming up on 100 soon. It's coming. A couple weeks. Under the Crossbones today is sponsored by Pirate Radio of the Treasure Coast, WKKC-DB, playing the best music and pirate radio talk. You can listen to Under the Crossbones on both those stations. Just go to pirateradioofthetreasurecoast.com or pirateradiotc.com. And don't forget to download their apps. That's the Pirate Radio Treasure Coast app for the music station and Pirate Radio Talk for the talk station. I got a free ebook for you, too. Make sure you grab that. It's Alexander Exquemelin's Pirates of Panama or Buccaneers of America, whichever title you prefer. It's out under both of those. And this is a book that goes back to 1678 was when it was first published. And that's just smack doodly dab right in the middle of the golden age of piracy right there. And Alexander Exquemelin was a doctor who ended up on pirate ships and wrote about his experiences. So it's firsthand stuff from the golden age of piracy. And I've got a free copy of it for you. Just go to underthecrossbones.com, click the free ebook button, and you can download it right there. If you're out and about and all you got your cell phone, text the word pirate and your email address to 94253. Just text the word pirate and your email address. Got to have both of them in there. Text that to 94253, and it will kick you back a little link to download the ebook there. And I hope you enjoy it. And that's our show for today, friends. Thank you once again for tuning in. Keep telling your friends. Keep leaving those iTunes reviews. All of that makes me happy and grows the show. Like I said, June, our biggest month ever. And that is all because of you. And partially because of Apple for featuring us earlier in the month. Or last month. I guess that was last month. So thanks for everybody that stayed on board from that. Very cool, and I'm glad to have you here. Again, join us on Facebook, facebook.com/underthecrossbones, and Twitter @undercrossbones. And all the show notes for this show, underthecrossbones.com/097. If you're not subscribed, make sure you're subscribed through Apple Podcasts, as they call it now, or Stitcher, Slacker, Google Play, Podcast Addict, whatever your podcatcher of choice is. And I will keep putting them out for you. Deal? Deal. I'll see you next week.